So it's just a legal condition of our profession. So this file, I believe, let's see, they have set up the viewport here. And so let's just take a close look at what this viewport is. Now, I have one that's complete right here. And here's our cool little title block that we made, and it has the attributes in it. And we can see it says floor plan and the date, and that's all excellent. Over here on layout 2, we're gonna make layout 2 correct now. Okay, so this one's already done, but I'm gonna kind of repeat the exercise so that you guys can see how it works. Okay, so here I'm gonna go to layout 2, and the first thing I want to do is grab that viewport. The video talks about, you know, what you're looking at, what all these different pieces are that are on the screen. So I'm assuming you guys have watched that. What we want to do is we grab this element here. This is called a viewport, and I'm going to put this on the correct layer. This file has a viewport layer already, so I'm going to use it, gviewport. And so now that creates the viewport, and the video goes into it, but I'll just show you. You know, that viewport controls. It's like a window looking back out to the model space. Okay, so when I've got that viewport set, I'm going to select it, and there's two functions the viewport does for me that are super critical. One is the scale, and one is controlling the layers. Okay, there's two things it does, so I'm going to show you each of those. First, the scale. Here's the viewport, and I can see there's an object in there. I have to select the viewport, and then you can control the scale right here. And you can put it, I'm going to put it on 1/4 inch, and then you're going to lock it. Okay, if you've done it well, then you never have to unlock it again. You want to leave it locked forever, it's done. If you need to move things around, you can always adjust the size of the viewport. Locking the viewport, the only thing that does is make it so that the scale won't change again, right? So now that I've got it scaled correctly, I can lock it. Now, sometimes you will start a new layout. Let me just start a brand new one. Here's another one. Now, what's happening here is because my model space is turned 1/4 inch to a foot, it's automatically turning these to 1/4 inch to a foot. But if my model space was set 1:1, let's set my model space 1:1, and I'll make another layout. I know I'm going to end up with all these layouts, kind of silly. This one came in, and it's telling me the annotation scale is 1:1, but the standard scale is custom. And so what it's doing is it's giving me a random size viewport based on what it thinks is a good size because of the paper that I'm using. And it says, hey, based on that, I'm just going to sort of fill up the page with your work, right? It sort of sets a margin and it just makes it big enough to fit the page. And so you can see down here, my scale is like 0.019, blah, blah. That's like a ridiculous scale. You could never measure this drawing. So what it will do is it'll just zoom extents. But then you can see it, you can change the size of it on that sheet of paper and you can have it rearranged. It's not uncommon to have a big drawing, and when you come in, you're drawing, you have a whole bunch of pieces to your drawing and they're all over the place. It's like this, right? Now watch what happens when I adjust this scale. It's going to zoom into an area at the middle and make that point on the screen the correct scale. So if I change this 1/4, watch what it does. Look, pay attention to this corner right here. And when I click 1/4, it goes zip, and it zooms off the screen. Scale is correct. It's perfect, right? I lock it. I say, yeah, I want that locked. There, I locked it. So I set the scale and locked it. But I can't see my work because it's zoomed in like way over here somewhere. So what I need to do in this case, I need to expand the size of this viewport. There's my work, okay? And then when I reformat the size of the viewport, then you can have the viewport locked and you can see your work at the same time. Now that viewport's currently on the incorrect layer, so I'm going to go ahead and fix that. gviewport. Okay. So now this one's the same as the others, right? And I'm going to kind of move it back towards the origin. Okay. So that's half the problem, and you can see this one, like it didn't regenerate the lines yet. So I need to double click in there, RE, enter, and then it regenerates those lines. Okay. Hopefully, if you guys were having problems, that answers some of those questions, or at least gives you like where to work, right? Gives you the idea of where to work. Okay, now we're ready to put in our title block. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the title blocks, and I need to find that vertical one. Let's go to current drawing. There's a good one. This is whoever's file it is. And I'm just going to click and drag this onto the screen. It's not at the origin right now, so I'm going to select it. That little dot wants to be right at the origin, so I selected it, and I'm going to say the position. Instead of 9/16 and 1 1/4, I'm just going to say 0, enter, 0, enter. Now it's at the origin. Okay, that's important because we're going to have multiple layouts, and we want to have them all set up the same way, so when we print, we can just print them all without having to reset every time. And if they're all started at the origin, then you'll be able to do that. So I want to make sure that my title blocks are always inserted at 0, 0, 0. Then you position your work inside that title block. So I'm going to just move this over, and it will fit pretty comfortably on the page. Now, if this was drawn really nicely, if this drawing is set up nicely, that viewport line here is on a non-print layer. So let's just check and see. I'm going to squeeze over, and I can see that one is on a non-print layer. That non-print layer means that when I go to print this, you won't see that purple line, okay, which is nice. We don't need to see that purple line. So that's how we set up a viewport, and that's sort of a repeat from the video, but that we need to kind of get that step done, and a few people still were struggling with that. I think ND kind of made it to the same place. Yes, she's got the, oops, this one's not locked. Maybe I unlocked it, I don't know. So let's do that again. I'm going to select it, and the annotation scale is what with the standard scale, 1/4 inch to a foot. And I am intentionally kind of doing this at different locations. Like this control shows up several different places. It shows up here. It also shows up down here. Right now that I've got it done, I can lock it. And then I can see I kind of moved it around, and it's not very pretty. So let's move that back so that this is on the page like that. And again, the viewport doesn't print. So having it large just makes it easier to select it. Might be a little bit kind of big, but it doesn't really matter, right? Because at the end of the day, you're not going to print it anyway. Okay, and again, we'd want to regenerate this, and then there's that pattern is back. Okay. Okay, so that's the first thing is that's talking about setting up a viewport with respect to scale. Any questions about setting the scale of the viewport? My coffee is kicking in. I'm getting faster and faster. Okay.
I didn't have a question about the scale and the viewport, but I did have a question about the layers whenever you get a chance to that.
Yeah, so that's our next point, because viewports, remember, do two things. I feel like Nixon. I'm holding up both hands. You can't see my face, but I'm holding up both hands with the piece, the two, you know, number 2 in each hand. The viewport set scale, and then we're going to set layers. So this particular drawing that I'm looking at only has layers for the floor plan, and then it has the title block layers, right? That's it. That's the only thing in here. So because that's the case, there's not a lot of layers to manipulate in this particular drawing. So I'm going to go ahead and move over to the next one, which is going to be, I think GE was the next one, sort of.
I think my garage, when I made the block, I was confused about, so I did the hidden for the garage door, and then for the space, it remains black whenever you go into like the preview mode of it, or.
Which one remains black?
The one at the very bottom, the garage door, when it's the block. And I didn't know if it was because of the block. And maybe I was just using this.
Well, all of these lines they're yellow and green and cyan. They should all print black.
Yeah, but on the page, it was still black, but it doesn't look like it is anymore. So maybe I did something and I don't realize it.
When you say it was black, what do you mean? The ink in the print, or something else?
It was black. So where it was yellow.
Oh, down here. You mean this line here?
Yes.
Okay, yes. So, okay, let me position this a little differently. I'm going to move this back inside the frame of the building like that. So what I'm noticing there, when I look closely, I can see this is a white line. Okay, so if we look at that block, this is a question about the block, really. So let's take about the door block, the garage door block. So I selected, I'm going to edit that block and take a quick look at it. Let's see, 7 by 16 garage door, and I click OK. Okay, so this part of the drawing should be drawn on layer 0, color by layer, and then this part of the drawing is on A over, color by layer. Okay, so what happens with a block is if it's drawn like this piece where it's 0 by layer, okay, because this is correct, you did this right, so I'm going to close this. That part of the drawing should obey the layer that the block is inserted on. Okay, so in this case, the block should be not inserted on layer 0, it should be inserted on a door. Boom. And now you'll notice it turned yellow. If I change the layer color for a door, like just briefly, if I change this layer color so you can identify it, you'll see it turns pink, right? That should also affect this piece at the back, right? Now, the reason that we do that, the reason that we make these objects and then insert them on a different layer than 0 is because we want to have this kind of control. We want to be able to manipulate portions of the drawing based on which part of the building they're representing and be able to manipulate their layers. The reason that that's important is because the layers control the color controls the line weight. And so different people will use the floor plan. For example, if this was a commercial building, and it's not a commercial building, it's a little tiny garage, but let's just say that the same layers were being used to draw an office building, there'd be much more electrical information, okay? And the electrical engineer would be, laying out light fixtures and laying out a power grid and where's the box, where are all the boxes and all that kind of stuff. And they'd be like, well, I need to know where the doors are, but that's not what's important to me. And so the electrical engineer would come in here and they would select the door, they would select the floor lines, the glazing, everything overhead. They would take all those layers and they would say, you know what, I'm going to print those so they're really faint on my page. And the walls are important, but not nearly as important as my electrical symbols. I'm going to make them a fine line. And then I'm going to take my electrical symbols, and those are really important to me, so I'm going to make those really bold, right? And so the electrical engineer would look at this drawing like this, right? We can only do that if we're working with those layers very carefully. And so in a moment, we're going to see how we can do that differently in each viewport. This is called a viewport color override. And the viewport color overrides are going to be what becomes really important. But we can only use them if things are organized on the correct layers. So I'm going to undo those changes because that looks really, really funny to me. This drawing looks funny, and that drawing looks less funny. Now that looks correct to me. But that's why we're very picky about these layers, and why I want to make sure that you guys understand how to make layers show up and disappear in viewports and be controlled in viewports. Okay, so does that help clarify it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. Any other questions anybody have about setting up this initial viewport? Because if you can get one and you can see what's going on, then the other ones will start to click into place. But if you can't get one, then the other ones are going to be a nightmare.
David, I have a quick question.
Hit it.
So no matter how many times I positioned my my actual viewport on the paper, when I went to the print preview, I always had one of my lines cutting off, and it was either my right or my left line. I could not for the life of me.
On your title block.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a plotting issue. So if you'll remind me to get to that when we're nearer the end, we'll talk about the printing questions. Because I noticed that people had a lot of problems getting the plotting to work generally. Like even with the A and the F, there were all sorts of weird plotting issues. And I know that we need to go through that again. So just remind me when we get towards the end. Don't let me forget.
It's probably mine. Sorry. Thank you.
No, actually, I'm teaching 2 sections of that first part of the class. Everybody else stopped at the test, but you guys went forward into this garage plan. But people were just like everywhere. And I think it had a lot to do with if they had a Mac or not. And I put in the syllabus that I wasn't going to teach Mac. So I know that's like, this software is just not built for the Mac. So that may be part of the problem for some of you, but we'll look at it again and we'll see what we can get. Any case, so that gets us one of the viewports set up, okay? And we're looking at ND, And then I also wanted to look at MC, this one here, just to make sure that this one is coming along too. So this one also, the viewport is set. Now here, this is the one I was tearing apart and playing with again and again, but I can see the same sort of setup, okay? So I'm gonna move to the next topic now. Can't select my viewport. I couldn't put it on the G viewport layer. So let's see, GE, that's the next one actually. You're gonna be the next one to talk about. So let's take a look down the list and just make sure we've got the same things. We've got the door, the floor. I'm going to be picky with you here, and I'm going to say this needs to be 4 letters. So when you want to change the layer name, you can select it. Like I click on it once, and then I click again, wait just a second, and it will allow you to fix the name 4 letters. A glaze, a over, a wall, E line, light, power, switch, title block line, title block text, viewport, S head, S slab, SF frame. And I'm going to switch this one to 4 letters also. If you get in the habit now, then when you go work for somebody and they're like, you have to use National CAD standards. Well, National CAD standards says they have to be 4 letters. It's a rule, and it becomes a legal issue. So in terms of if the work is acceptable, are you going to get paid or not? Because if you do it wrong, then you're not doing the work, you're doing something else. So we just pay attention to your layer naming. And then what we're going to do is I can see S head is blue, which is correct, but the line type needs to be brought in. The line type we need is called Phantom 2 right here. And I'm going to go ahead and assign that line type. And then as we work our way up, we can see the viewports is purple, that's good. Title block text and line switch, green, 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 green. Wall is cyan, A over is green, glaze is yellow, floor is going to be yellow also. That's the one that's not quite right. And then S frame should be cyan also. And this is where we get into some confusing graphics. Okay, so there's a lot of cyan lines on the screen. And you've got 3 different sets of information in this one drawing, which is correct. But now what we have to do is we have to separate those into 3 different drawings. Okay, and you guys have been really good. I didn't see anybody make the mistake of like drawing the floor plan here and then moving over and drawing the slab plan here and then moving over and drawing. We want them to stack up. The reason we want them to stack up is, let's say the client wants to change the building. Let's say, hey, you know what? We don't need a 24-foot garage. We need a 28-foot garage. We need to add 4 feet. So, in that case, you would say, okay, fine, easy. I can take a stretch command and I can select this garage and stretch it back 4 feet. Right now I've got a 28-foot garage. And notice I stretched the slab, the frame, and the walls all together. I have to put in a few more trusses. If it was still an array, that would even be easier. But if it's not, then we can at least copy these up, right? An extra distance. And then now we've got a bigger building and everything is correct, right? I'm going to undo that. But if everything's not stacked up, then that becomes very difficult to do, right? So having all 3 plans on top of each other is correct. That's the way to approach this. Now, how do we separate it out? How do we create it in all of its different pieces? So I'm going to go over here to layout 1. And right now we don't have a title block yet put in this drawing. But I do see the layers, which makes me think the block is probably handy. It's just not yet inserted correctly. So if I zoom in right here, I can see there's a piece of title block. I bet that's the title block right here. Actually, that's just a layer 0. So maybe the title block was inserted and then exploded. I'm going to delete that. So let's take a look. And you can see like I'm in the layout and I can't zoom in and out. I'm stuck. So I got to lock the viewport and then step back, right? Or another thing I could do if I'm in here and the viewport is locked and I'm stuck and I can't see what's going on. The other thing I can do is I can go switch over to model space and then come back. And I should now be able to zoom out. Oh, no, I'm stuck. So again, what I have to do is lock the viewport and then I can zoom out. it only gets more fun when you have lots of various viewports to deal with.